I've talked before about how I use interactive notebooks, or rather my version of interactive notebooks, in my classes. And I thought today I would show you what I do to set up the notebooks and how students set up their notebooks, and then give you an example of how I teach using these notebooks. So the first thing is, for my teacher exemplar, I have gone with the plastic composition book, and this is a 100-page book. For my life science class, I ask that they get a 100-page notebook. For my physical science class, I ask that they get two 80-page notebooks, because they do one for physical science or one for physics first semester, and then they'll start a new one for chemistry second semester. So this is my class copy notebook. I have this printed off in color for all the students, and we spend the first day of the semester prepping notebooks. So they get a copy of this, they have to cut it out, and then we put it on with clear tape. If they want, they can get a copy of our mascot. So this is the attitude I want my students to have. They may just be starting out, but they have so much potential, and they will one day be great dinosaurs. They may start off as little chicks, but they are going to be dinosaurs. So this is how we set up the front. And in the back, before we get started, I get a quart Ziploc bag, and I staple it to the very back cover. And I use about 5 staples. I start in the middle, and then I go out to each side, and then get the 2 to each side, so I can get it relatively straight. But if you get a quart Ziploc bag, it fits nicely in the back of any of the notebooks. And then we put duct tape over the back of the staples, because as students pull it in and out of their backpack, those staples will start poking up. And I keep duct tape handy so that they can, if it does start wearing thin, they can put a new piece down, at any point in time through the year. But this is to hold anything that they cut out that we don't get to. So if they cut out, let's say, several days worth of notes, which is actually how I do it. I have them cut out multiple days worth of notes, and then we'll set up the first page, and everything else gets stored here in the bag in the back of the book. And you get used to saying that rapidly. Put everything in the bag in the back of your book. And sometimes they do. Every now and then you get students who lose stuff, but generally speaking, the majority of them do keep it if you utilize this and if you train them to use this. So that's the cover and the storage of cutout pieces that you don't get to using yet. I do have on the intro page student rights and my grading scale. And they do take some stuff home and have parents sign and everything. Each unit has a table of contents. Now, I provide the tabs. My classes are not that big, and it makes them seem more special. But if you have large classes, you can just do this with tape. Put a little piece of tape, fold it over, have it stick off the edge there. You could even put, the little number 1 inside of it before you fold it to make a tab that says 1 and 2 and 3. So, Unit 1, Introduction to Life Science. I have them skip a line and write page number. And then I have them write the titles on each page. As we go, they come back and they fill them in with the page number that you will find them on. And part of this is, and I tell them straight off the bat, I am training them to follow verbal directions. I do write examples on the board. I will, leave this side blank. I'll draw a line. I will draw a line here, write Unit 1, Introduction to Life Science. I'll draw another line with a little dotted line showing the margins and write page number. and show them how to write it. But I do try and put a lot of it in words. And I'll walk around and point out as we go what they should do. So, Unit 1, okay, got through all that. We're actually in Unit 2 now, and this is what I wanted to show you specifically. Here is how I print, and this is again Stephanie Elkowitz. This is her cell and cell membrane interactive notebook unit, and again, I highly recommend it. You scroll down and you can see in the table of contents there are all kinds of things in these packages, not only the parts that I use, the images and notes, but also quizzes and reflection sections. So if you're going to print, go in and select multiple, and then you want to do it 2 by 1 and landscape. And then you can go up and you can type the pages that you want. I'm only going to type a few of the ones I used, but just type a page and separate them by commas. And then after you do that, I would go up and see, you can double check, and those are only the pages I typed. One of the things that I would do is make sure when you are printing that you pick grayscale or go in and pick black and white in the color. You really don't want to be printing these using your school's colored ink. So with the interactive notebook, there are several lessons that I want to teach the students that actually don't necessarily have anything to do with science. In these notebooks, I have them learn how to outline or how to take notes in outline format. It's kind of modified. So the key things have something on the outside of the margins. Anything that goes with it, we will find with the little sign or symbol of their choosing right inside and under. And then we keep kind of indenting. So these go with Virchow, and then directly with the idea that he's the father of modern pathology. So we work on how to take notes. We work on highlighting. So what I have is I have a pencil bag, one for each table, which 2 students sit at a table. And it will have colored pencils and 2 highlighters and 2 pairs of scissors, so that it's basically the utensils needed for putting this together. I do have them use liquid glue. And so many people are like, why don't you have them use stick glue? And my reasoning behind this is, if they can't control the flow of glue through a glue bottle, then how are they going to be able to control pouring something out of a beaker when they take chemistry? Either Intro to Chemistry and Physical Science, 2nd semester of 8th grade, or a chemistry class. There is a eye-hand coordination that must be developed. And yes, I make them use liquid glue. And if their pages get glued together, that's too bad. I don't grade them. They need to learn to be neat. We talk about highlighting. How highlighting is not coloring the entire page. You bold highlight key things, and then you can underline secondary ideas. So they have this glued in, and then I add information to it. They have to write some notes. but they have the key things here printed, which if you are having a student who has an IEP, this is awesome. Okay. If you have a student who has an IEP and has difficulty writing, you can just, have this typed up, print off, and they glue it here on the other side. But other students need to learn how to write, and how to write where they can read their own handwriting. I do a lot of color coding. Okay, so here on this chart, you have orange for unicellular organisms and pink for multicellular. And here on the notes, you have orange on the unicellular and pink on the multicellular. And again, we add written notes. Okay. These are the pages that I was wanting to talk about. And I have bought these notes from Stephanie Elkowitz. I am putting her link in the description for this video. If you teach science, there are a lot of different ways to do things out there. You have multiple really good sources for the 5E type of teaching and a whole bunch of other things. Her notes fit my style. I like them. I like the information that's in them. 99.999% of the time, I agree fully with what's in there. And so I use them. If you think that this is interesting, like I said, I will put a link to her TPT site in the comments. I am in no way sponsored by her. I have just been using notes from her for, I'm going to say 10 years, 9 years now, a very long time. But my students set up these 4 pages that I'm about to show you at the same time. So what I do is I print everything off for the animal cells, the plant cells, the prokaryotes / bacteria, and the protists. So I print off all of those pages, and I will show you how I print them. I print them half size. I print them 2 pages to a printed page. That way I'm not killing quite so many trees. Plus it makes it small enough to put into the notebook and still have room to write notes. So I print everything out and I give them to the students and I have them cut out the pieces. And between cutting them out and setting them up, it will take probably the first day, if you've done other things. The students get faster. The first few days, the first few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of doing notebook stuff, it seems to just crawl on and go very slowly. It is still faster than having students write everything. But as they get used to this, the speed really does pick up. And you will be surprised how fast you actually can get notes down and then do some in-depth discussions or activities. Okay. So I printed those off, and actually I printed, after the protists, I printed cell membrane stuff, cell transport, osmosis, and endo and exocytosis. So I just basically gave them the last chunks. I didn't give them this one. I'm not going to put this on this unit test. So I gave them the last set of notes for the unit. And so they cut everything out, and then we started gluing stuff in. And again, I kind of draw a diagram on the board, and I tell them to find the notes that say animal cell, and the title is right at the top of the notes. So each little set of notes, even when it's cut out, has a title. And then I tell them to find the round cell. Basically, you could say the round cell with all the stuff in it. And I tell them to find, and this is actually one big piece. I have them cut it where it's 3 and 2 so that it fits on the page better. And I have them find the one that does not have the chloroplast on it. And so then we talk about notes get glued in the top left page. And you can tell them to flap them if you want. So they would fold and only glue down the top part. And then that gives them additional room to write. I, for the 7th grade, don't flap unless I need to. That way I can tell them, with my size handwriting, it took almost half a page. And they can start to gauge how much of a page it's going to take them. And so that gives them some idea of what they need as far as spacing as they move forward. So notes go on the top left. I always have them glue notes on the top left. Then I have them do the little flappy things, and that's what I call them because I teach middle school, on the bottom left. And I have them, in my book, if something is flapped, I highlight the section that I glue down. So this is glued and it flaps up. This is glued and it flaps up. This is glued and it flaps up. And that is glued and it flaps up. So they start recognizing patterns. So I have them glue in these things and put the title on the page, and then come back to the table of contents and put the title where we are. So animal cells for me, page 18. Then we turn the page and I tell them the plant cell page is set up exactly like the animal cell page. So find the notes that say plant cell at the top. Find the flappy things that do have the chloroplast. And find the square cell. And then as they're gluing in, I am walking around and I have my book and I am showing them my pages. And then the bacteria, it's just the notes glued to the top left and the diagram of the cell with the tail glued to the bottom right. And they start keying in on these locations because I am consistent. Notes on the top left, diagrams on the bottom right. Notes on the top left, diagrams on the bottom right. And I repeat that over and over and over. And then the last glue in on this section is the protist. And again, notes top left, they say protist. Okay, they should have the picture of the oval with the little star on the bottom. And that is how I describe it because we haven't talked about any organelles yet. They get all these glued in. Then we go back and I color code with them. And I tell them specific colors for certain things. I tell them find a purple. And they get a purple colored pencil out. And I have them do the membrane for every cell. I have them do the membrane, a purple. And I tell them the reason I pick purple is when we study the membrane, they will have one part that's blue and one part that's red. So if you go in on that, you would see blue and red, but as you come out, you see purple. And so there is a reason I have chosen that color. Now we haven't gotten to the membranes yet, but you can see when we would get there, they have the blue and the red. Hydrophilic heads are blue, hydrophobic tails are red. So thus, cell membranes, whenever they are small, are purple. I then tell them to find a yellow and find the circle with the squiggly lines, and I will draw mitochondria on the board. And I will tell them to color it yellow, and that the animal cell and the plant cell both have them. Okay. The prokaryote and the protists do not have images of them. Okay. But the animal and plant cells do. And I asked them, why might I have chosen yellow? What does yellow make you think of? And we kind of talk about it, and finally somebody almost always says it's energy or light. And yeah, mitochondria has to do with releasing energy for the cell to use. So I have picked yellow because I want to key in that there is energy involved. I have them pick a red colored pencil, and I tell them to sharpen it because this takes the longest. And every little tiny circle, I have them dot red. And there are red dots in every cell. Okay, so those are a little bit bigger than normal, but I wanted red dots in every cell. And we go back to when we talked about cells the first day of this unit. Okay. Actually, it wasn't the first day. It was probably about the 4th or 5th day, when we talked about things all cells have. And it's like, okay, you just colored red dots in every cell. And remember, I am picking colors that have things to do with, or in some way will key your brain in. And I ask them what red might indicate. And it is something that all cells have. And usually there's a couple of them that go back to that page and they look at it and they will guess ribosomes. And then I'll say, okay, why did I pick it? And they're like, well, it starts with an R. Yes. Okay, you've got your ribosomes. They start with an R. Then I have them color the endoplasmic reticulum pink because it is within the same kind of spectrum as red. And so they kind of go together. Now, yes, you have free ribosomes, but, you know, again, we are coding this. I'm coding this for middle school. So I am grouping like colors, and I am trying to pick logical colors. Okay, sometimes it's just a color we haven't used because there are only so many colors. Like the fact that I picked dark blue for the Golgi complex when I'm going to be using it later for the hydrophilic heads. You know, there are only so many colors in a pack of colored pencils. You have to make do. Okay. Vacuoles. Okay. I colored blue because the central vacuole in a plant holds mainly water. So light blue is for vacuoles. Greens are for the chloroplast. And I actually have them differentiate the dark green where the chlorophyll is found in the thylakoids versus light green for just the general chloroplast. Cell wall is brown because we think of wood, and so the cell wall is brown. The capsule is a brownish, and then the tail, the flagella, is kind of a light brown. Again, those things usually found on the outer edges. Okay, and I do talk about there's a cell wall in here, but I want to show a capsule. So again, kind of fudging it a little. So I have lysosomes as orange. Okay. Lysosomes in the animal cell, lysosomes in the protists, and your contractile vacuole is a light orange. So anything dealing with recycling of waste or getting rid of waste is in that orangish category. So they are related. The nucleus and the nucleolus and the macro and micronuclei I have colored within kind of the teal. And gullet, I just, picked a color. Again, it kind of unfortunately clashes a little bit with the macro and micronuclei, but, that it is what it is. You're limited with colors. Do what you can. So once we color those and we go back and forth talking about why I picked the colors, okay, and as we're going along, they are color coding the numbers on the notes. So when we did the membrane, they color coded 1 on the animal cell. They color coded 1 on the plant cell. They color coded 2 for the protist or the prokaryote, and they colored 1 for the protist. So as you go, you were color coding these numbers. And I have them color these little flappies too. So there's a lot of coloring the first few days. So you've taken a day and a half to cut and glue, and then you start with the color coding. So you're looking at about 3 days kind of prep. But in that prep, you have already introduced every single organelle. Now you get to the part where they're writing, and they have heard these words multiple times. So when you start throwing words like endoplasmic reticulum to them, they've actually heard it. They've colored it. It's not quite so scary. They know where it is. They can look at the picture. Again, they are learning to highlight. Bold highlighting the vocab words, and underlining secondary information. So you're working on color coding. You're working on learning how to highlight. You do not just color everything. You are very picky about it. And then with all of that, you've gone over it. The only things that they're writing for animal cells is secondary information. Defining semipermeable. Talking a little bit more about vesicles and ATP. And you can go back to why did you pick yellow? Yellow makes people think of lightning or lights or energy. Okay. And then introducing things like enzymes, because those are found in the lysosome, and that is one of the words that they talk about here, but really isn't defined. So they write to clarify. You don't need to duplicate anything. Okay. I did actually here point out that a chloroplast has a double membrane, as well as they talk about a double membrane for the mitochondria. Okay. And we'll get into that when we talk about evolution. I tell them it's important, but we're not getting there just yet. So I do sometimes have them add things. Okay, the only things that we talked about here, talked a little bit about turgor pressure, photosynthesis, and again, I add the word thylakoids because I think they can handle it. I let my students use their notes on a test. Now, my tests are notoriously difficult if you do not study. If you do study and you know what's in your notebook, they really are easy, I'm going to say. And most of my students who study don't use their notebook very much. It's more there as a reassurance. But again, once you get the setup done, doing the notes doesn't take that long. Again, talk about bacteria. I like to introduce the different shapes and talk about like Streptococcus and Streptobacillus and how the name is actually part of the shape is part of the name. Okay. When we talk about plasmids, talk about how they're used today in science and the fact that insulin used to be harvested from pigs. Okay, but now we have bacteria producing it. Actual human insulin, not just insulin that is close to human insulin. Okay, and then last one we get to is the protists. Again, kind of an interesting fact. Giant kelp is an example of a multicellular protist. And talk about the macronucleus as the used and micronucleus as an archive. And we have finished with the notes because we've already talked about enzymes. They've already heard about almost all of these. We talk about the oral groove in the gullet and the contractile vacuole again. But the majority of these have been talked about. So doing these 4 pages together as a unit within a unit. Okay. And then what I tell the students to do underneath the flaps, anything as they are studying that they think they are going to have a hard time remembering, any key thing that they think they might want to know fast and in a hurry, I want them to put under here. If they think they are going to need it and they think they are going to have a hard time remembering it and then finding it, they put it here underneath the cell it's about. So that if they get stuck and if they are getting stressed because time on a test is running short, they can just flip here and say, okay, did I write it down? Okay, not, then maybe they need to look a little bit further other places. But teaching them to figure out what is important for them. What are they going to have trouble with? How to organize and make a notebook useful for them. And again, they're having their test on this soon. We are finishing up the unit as we go through cell membrane and cell transport. We are doing the egg lab where you use vinegar to take a shell off and stick it in salt water and stick it in sugar water, or stick it in salt water and then stick it in deionized water and have them see what happens. We talk about the hypertonic, hypotonic, and isotonic. So, and again, we've got the blue and the red here because we had purple here. And so that really is my reasoning behind using the notebooks. I find it works really well for those students who want to work. And again, if you think that this is something that goes with your way of teaching, I highly recommend, if you're in science, checking out notes and all of the supplies from Stephanie Elkowitz in Teachers Pay Teachers. But I'm going to go ahead and close for now because this is ending up a lot longer than I thought it would. If you have any questions, feel free to write them, in the comments, and I'll get back to you. I found that these really, especially if you've got students with various IEPs, this answers almost all of your IEP requirements. It really does. Except for the extended time one and a couple of others, this really is just kind of a catch-all. And it does give students a lot of skills that will transfer to other classes. And I've had students tell me that. So, I have found this very useful and worth the time it takes to do it. So, again, if you have any questions, put them down in the comments. Share this with somebody if you think they'll like it. And I hope to have you back for another viewing of how I teach certain things. So, as always, I hope the week ahead is wonderful. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this.